Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. Mon Tsang, founder and CEO of ChurnZero. Welcome, Mon.
Well, thank you, Alex. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on the podcast for the first time guest. And we've had you, I think, at SaaStock Conference last year. So engaged with the partnership sort of then. Obviously, interesting times sort of right now in the world. You're in Washington D.C. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Right in the middle of all the things that are happening politically in the U.S. Yeah, right downtown. Yeah. A few blocks from the White House, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. So yeah. I mean, as you say, we're having this conversation during perhaps whether it's the height or even before the height of the coronavirus sort of crisis that we're facing sort of this year. I mean, for you as an employer, I guess before we get into some of the details about yourself and the company, but like, how has it been sort of right now for you? What's happening right now as the CEO of ChurnZero?
Yeah, so just so for timing's sake, basically last week was the first time in the U.S. a lot of companies on the East Coast were sending their employees home to work from home 100%. And so it's been a bit of a way from the West Coast to the East Coast in terms of San Francisco was hit first, Seattle, that was the main area. And then it slowly, actually fairly quickly moved to the East Coast. So so I came in today to the office and, I drove, but it was very empty. There were not a lot of people on the streets. So sort of, it certainly has been a very quiet time. This is a very, for businesses, it's very, very uncertain. And the last time I really felt this level of uncertainty was probably, I imagine 9/11, right? When people just woke up and didn't know what the world was going to be like the next day, right? Like how big an impact was this going to be? And we're all really just bracing for maybe something that can kind of come through in a few months or have a lasting impact. So it's the uncertainty, which I think is really the toughest on businesses right now. And for the next 2 weeks, I think we're all going to be sort of mired in this, all this uncertainty.
Yeah, agree. And so the podcast, we're not going to talk solely or that much really around sort of coronavirus, but really just want to start off. First of all, let's get to know you and who are ChurnZero. Then we'll talk a bit about customer success for SaaS. And we'll also talk about what is very topical, and it's this kind of R3 rotational regional remote framework that you guys have developed, which is super interesting, certainly for me and I think our audience. So a lot to cover, but yeah. I think we'll get it done. And so let's start as I usually do. Whilst I asked you, I guess kind of first we jumped into the coronavirus, but usually I ask the guests, to introduce themselves, who you are. Who you are as a person. Let's find out a little bit more about yourself, and why you founded ChurnZero, what ChurnZero does.
Yeah, so thanks. So I'm Mon Tsang. I'm the co-founder of ChurnZero. This is my fourth startup, so I'm a repeat entrepreneur. Most of my life has been in the software business, mostly on the B2B side, and it's actually timely with sort of a pandemic or a recession. Really, any kind of recession or slowdown. Customer success, is an interesting space and timely as well because, at ChurnZero, we help customers fight customer churn, right? We help you keep your customers. And so, when these times happen, you tend to circle the wagons and you try to protect all the assets that you have in the company, right? And those assets are really your people, your cash, and then also your customers. The reason why I started this company was, my previous company, I saw all this great technology for sales and marketing. Like we knew all about our prospects, we knew all about the sales opportunities. But once, everyone became a customer, when someone became a customer, we really lost track of them. We really sort of stopped understanding what they did when we didn't bring the kind of technology that we brought pre-sales to the post-sales space. And so I really saw an opportunity to develop technology for customer success and everything post-sales.
Okay, awesome. And ChurnZero, I think you've been running it for around sort of 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, so we started in 2015 and onboarded our first customer in 2016.
And any sort of data just around the company? So like number of people, if you're happy to share, if you're happy to share revenue, great. If not, no worries. Are you bootstrapped? Have you raised venture capital, so on?
Sure. We've raised up to our Series A. So that's really two major outside rounds of capital. Still relatively small compared to the Bay Area type companies, but, a reasonable amount for East Coast, so $10 million all in. We've been pretty cash efficient. So, we haven't spent our Series A money at all, even though we raised it almost a year ago. We're about running on 60 people. Actually, 2 people started today in all this chaos. We're growing. We grew 2.5x last year. We'll grow 2.5x this year. We don't share the revenue numbers, but if you do the math on the employees, you'll get a number that you would expect for the kind of growth that our company would have.
Okay, awesome. And so you say this is the fourth sort of company that you started.
Mm-hmm.
Why do it again? Like, what's that within you that makes you want to kind of keep starting companies?
Yeah, I think for anyone who's an entrepreneur or definitely a repeat entrepreneur, you question if you should start another one, and then you wake up one day and you have to, right? And it's as simple as that. I mean, there's actually very little rationale wanting to start a company. It's actually not a great way to bring financial stability to your family. It's not a great way to relieve stress in your life. In many ways, you have upsides, but the variability is so high. It's never a great idea. It doesn't feel like a great idea. So there has to be something else pushing you. I can't tell you what it is. All I know is that, I wake up and this is what I want to do.
Awesome. Agree with all of that. And so let's talk a bit around sort of customer success. And you mentioned, obviously, in a time sort of economic crisis, how important customer success can be. Let's talk about it in and out of the time of crisis, and so the role of customer success companies or customer success for SaaS companies. Let's learn why it's important when there isn't a time of crisis, why it's important when there is.
Well, about 10 years ago, the software, of course, all moved to subscription, right? From licenses to subscriptions. And once that happened, that really did make a fundamental change in how you service your customers. It used to be where you can just have all customer interactions be inbound. In other words, they make the request into a support team that will then answer questions. And then you would have an account manager, make sure that they renew or at least buy more maintenance licenses. Now, with subscriptions, they can leave at any time, and you have to make sure your customers are happy. You have to make sure your customers are onboarded correctly, engage with your product and your service, engage with your company, so that a month later, a year later, 3 years later, however often your first term is, that they come back. So it's just now vitally important because customers do not have to stay with you, right? They have a choice every month, every year to leave. So customer success is extremely important to keep your business alive.
And what role does it play in terms of other areas of the business? What have you seen there?
Yeah, actually, I would say that there are certain departments that knew about sort of retention for even earlier than others. Like finance always knew the compounding effect of retention, right? So even many years ago, the person who really pounded the table on retention over and over again was generally the CFO, right? Because they just saw the numbers. They looked at a spreadsheet and they're like, it's, if we want to be successful, these things have to happen. We have to plug the leaky bucket of customers that are leaving. Sales now also knows is because, the worse your retention, the more they have to achieve, right? So, if you're going to have, say, an 80% retention rate, you need 20% new sales just to stay flat, right? And that has an impact on new sales. And so sales is starting to really understand. In fact, I think they understand pretty clearly now that the better the retention is, the less hard they're going to have to work. And then marketing also knows, because actually I think software buying is changing, right? Software buying is changing in a way where customers now really have a pedestal to talk about your product and service, whether it's B2C, which has been historically there, as well as B2B, right? So B2B customers are also talking about your product and service. So marketing knows that happy customers are going to help make it easier for them to market, because they can use the reviews, they can use the references and the referrals. Whereas, of course, if you have unhappy customers, unsuccessful customers, that's going to drag down marketing as well. So, all these other departments are really starting to see the effect of happy customers, successful customers, and that, of course, that pushes the onus on customer success to be that much more productive.
What are your thoughts on when SaaS companies, should be putting into place, a customer success function? What are your thoughts?
I think you have to start almost on day one thinking about customer success. Whether you have somebody, with that title in your company, probably you can wait to, some people say it's a first digit hire meaning 0 to 9. So I actually don't disagree with that. I think it's on a first digit hire. It's probably on, 6 to 9 rather than 1 to 5. But everybody in 1 to 5, I mean, you really have two things to, if you're employee 1 to 5, that group, you're interested in product market fit. That's all you care about. That's the only thing you care about, is to close your first handful of customers and keep your first handful of customers. And so everyone has to think about it. But in terms of getting a person involved, I would say probably, you're anywhere from 7 to 9 would be when you would hire your first customer success person.
And once you've done that, then like in terms of rolling out the customer success, what would that look like? You've hired your first customer success person. Do you just leave it up to them to I guess going to use their experience around working with customers? Do they need to be looking for technology? Like, how do you help this kind of first hire?
Yeah, the first hire is always the first hire in any new department, sales, marketing, whatnot. You need to find that person who is the generalist problem solver, right? Because that first customer success hire isn't there to ramp anything up, right? They're just not there to ramp anything up. They're there to discover, the process, the initial process to onboard a customer, to make sure they're using your product and service and are happy with it, and then to renew them, right? It's a very special actually, every one of your first single digit hires, they're all extremely special people, right? Because they are trying to find a way. And so when you bring your first customer success person in, make sure it's a person who you think can help you find a way to make it happen. And I would say it's when you have a few cycles of retention and renewals, where, in other words, you figured out, oh, okay, well, I have made X customer successful, right? Maybe for SMB, maybe that's 50 customers. Maybe for an enterprise, maybe that's 6 customers. Enterprise companies is 6 customers. But you have a sense of what it takes to engage and renew a customer. That's when you start thinking about ramping, right? Getting a second person, a third person, and then bringing technology to bear. So I would not do it on day one per se, right? Because day one, you're still trying to figure out how it works. But the first time you have a few revs of retention, make sure you worry about scaling.
So when talking of scaling, so you've got the first hire in for customer success, and you mentioned about this would be perhaps a little bit of a generalist. But I'm imagining this is not a VP of customer success, but a more kind of a more junior sort of member of the team. Then, as you start to scale, how do you then go about sort of building a customer success team? What is your advice there? Is it that generalist that you've hired in starts to build this out because they have that kind of experience? Share
yeah. What I've seen happen a lot, and this I've seen at many companies, is your first 3 or 4, tend to be the same, right? Sort of a full stack, quote unquote, full stack, soup to nuts type CSM, this kind of a unicorn type person who can do everything from, onboarding, which often will tend to be technical, to asking for the renewal and asking for expansion, which tends to be more of a business ask, right? So that's really asking a lot of, from one person to do everything from being customer responsive to having substantial business conversations. But that's what you're going to have to look for maybe your first 3 CSMs, right? And when you may be hiring your 4th or 5th into the space, that's when you can actually think about specializing, right? Maybe you can say, well, onboarding is fairly special in my company, right? Maybe it's fairly technical. Maybe there's an integration involved. Maybe there's training involved. So I'm going to have an onboarding team, and I'm going to have specialists that do onboarding. And then maybe I'll have, they'll pass it over to a CS team once the onboardings happen. So I would say, your first 3 or 4 ought to be generalists. But then at that point, it's actually fairly difficult to kind of hire that generalist over and over again. And as you scale, as you get your company to have a team of 12, a team of 24, you'll start to specialize. And depending on your company, you'll have specialists in different parts of the organization. Maybe there's an expansion team, maybe there's a renewals team, but it really does depend on what type of business model you have.
If there are some SaaS companies founders that are listening that don't have a customer success function to right now, do you have any particular advice around that?
Yeah, I don't see very many of those anymore, but I will tell you this, right? So this is my 4th company. I've been doing software for over 20 years, 25. I'm just going to keep counting, 30 years now, and here's what's happening, right? When I started raising money for my first company, we talked about retention. Never we talked about retention. And then maybe 10 years ago, when we talked about retention, it would happen during due diligence, right? So you have your first meeting, you have your second meeting, and finally during due diligence, you touch upon retention. If you go out and raise money right now, it will be in the first 5 minutes that you will talk about retention, maybe in the first 2 minutes that you talk about retention. And so many VCs will simply not talk to you if you have below average retention, right? It has become a top 2 metric in assessing a business, right? Oftentimes it's new business growth and it's retention. And so if you have poor retention, you will have no conversation with anybody who wants to be an investor in your company. It's that important now. So I can talk all I can talk all I want about customers and all that, but in the end, the people who are passing out the money, the investors, are now seeing it as a top 2 metric in order to evaluate companies. So take that seriously.
Let's sort of move then to the topic of remote work, which again, I think I've certainly seen the trend over the last year, people talking more about remote work, and because we have like the tools, to do it, right? And I guess arguably make us more efficient. Now, obviously, given sort of this year and the coronavirus sort of crisis, again, remote work is kind of even the trend has accelerated, and it's a topic that everybody's talking about, and I'm getting asked comments around this, and you emailed over the weekend and again sent over that ChurnZero has this framework on remote work, and it's not fully remote, it's hybrid sort of remote. Let's talk about this framework, because I think it's super interesting, super topical for our audience who arguably everybody right now could be working from home. So let's talk about the R3 framework. What is it?
Yeah, so we call it rotational, regional, remote. And I'll tell you why we did it. So we're in DC, Washington, DC. Traffic is horrible. Our average employee probably takes half an hour to an hour to work each day, right? But then we also want to be able to draw from the entire pool in the DC area, which is very large. So we started by saying, let's just work from home 2 or 3 times a week, right? That's how we started. So we would come in the office Monday and Wednesday, and then an occasional Thursday. And then we would all work from home the other days. It worked great. People loved it. You got the touch points, the human touch points with people that you wanted on your Monday and Wednesdays. And then everyone got the productivity of working from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, right? So it was a really good balance of having the human touch as well as being remote. Now the problem was as we started to grow, right, I was staring at, getting the worst of both worlds, right? Having to have a full office to have everybody in on Monday and Wednesdays, and having to be fully empty on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So as we grew, we decided to split the company into groups. we had letter groups, so A to D, and departmental groups, sales, marketing, and so on. And so every day, every single day, we would bring in 2 groups together. So an A, B group, say on a Monday, and then a sales and marketing on Tuesday, and then a C and D on Wednesday, and so on and so forth. And basically, we would rotate the employee staff into the office every single day of the week. Now that gave us a lot of benefits, right? Everybody saw each other within about 6 business days, right? And within 6 business days, you saw every single one of your colleagues. That was fantastic. As a company, we didn't have to get the big space. We only needed half the space, right? Because people were rotating in every single day. And then we also got access to a much bigger employee pool, right? So people who lived an hour away can actually choose to come work for us because they were only going to commute in approximately 1 to 3 times a week, with this R3 schedule. So it was a very nice hybrid remote schedule that basically combined remote work with in-person work. And it's been super successful for us.
So you say it's been successful. Is there anything that you can share in terms of the impact on the business that's sort of measurable? I think there's something around sort of like NPS, but again, like on productivity, or even like how that sort of impacted on revenue.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically there's really 2 major measures that measure success for me as a company, right? I think it's hard to measure productivity in a knowledge worker. I mean, I guess you can look at individual performance, but overall, as a company, we've been hitting our annual goals year after year, right? Within 2 percentage points every year. It's actually kind of freaky how close we hit it. So that's number 1, right? So at the broadest level, the companies we're hitting our growth targets, our revenue targets, and our cost targets, right? So that's and we've done it over the last 3 years. So with R3 in place. And the other thing is we do an employee NPS, and currently our NPS is standing in the 80s, right? Which is higher than Apple, higher than Bose, higher than sort of the best in the business. So we think so those 2 things basically say that we have very happy employees who want to work for us, helping the company hit its goals, right? As long as those 2 things are happening, that at least what I have now is working, right? Now it could be product, it could be other things, but certainly this R3 concept is not hurting us at all.
Were there any initial kind of challenges or things that you saw when you went to this sort of framework, or was it just plain sailing?
Well, actually, there was one problem I had with the original framework, which was, 2 on and everybody went home for those 2 weeks. Was when you start the companies, oftentimes you would hire sort of people who've done it before, right? And then when you get bigger, you tend to hire more junior folks, right? Because you have more junior tasks. And that actually was a problem because, maybe folks who just graduated from college or university, 1, you don't have the work ethic. Second, you may not even have the room at home to work, right? You may even have, because you have 3 or 4 roommates, there's no place for you to work. And so our most junior employees would be coming in on these days where nobody was in the office, right? And so actually going to R3 put somebody in the office every single day. And it did allow for the junior folks who, by the way, we do have a group called the E group, and the E group is the everyday group. And those folks have to come in. So these are folks who are newer to work, right? So we want them to learn a good work ethic and really try to understand how to do their jobs. The E group also is, anybody who does want to come in every day. You want to come in every day because you prefer that, you can definitely come in every day. And that was a real perk for us, to help drive the junior folks, right? If you're fully remote, and there's a lot of companies who are making that work. The one thing I always thought about if you're fully remote is how do you help those people who don't have a great place to work, right? How do you help those people who don't have a great, perhaps work ethic or the daily grind they're just not used to yet? How do you help them? And I think R3 is a great way to help those folks. Other issues that we have, just, to answer your, like scheduling is trickier, right? You basically now have to, with this remote hybrid process, you actually have to behave like a remote company first, right? So you do have to have everything involved, all the tech, and behave like a remote company first, and then this will work really, really well because you'll get the benefit of both.
What tech are you using to enable this? What is your kind of hybrid remote or remote tech stack?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that will be surprising to you, right? So we use GoToMeeting, we use Zoom, and we use Slack, right? So we use all the things you would expect us to use. Everyone has a laptop they take home. All our desks are hot desks, so everyone is when they walk in, they choose the desk. Now they sanitize the desk, choose the desk, plug in, and then they have monitors, and power. And then we also outfit your home office with a similar rig, right? So when you go home, you'll have a second monitor. You'll have what you need to be productive. But look, it's as you know, it's easy to do knowledge work now remotely, right? So the technology's here. It's easy. It is a frame of mind more than anything else. And by the way, I think it's mostly prejudice, right? Like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I still want to come to work in the office, right? So I have to almost fight myself to say, look, you have to be, productivity has nothing to do with being in the office. You have to fight that every single day, and I know I fight it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we've got quite a young team at SaaStock, and when we announced, the UK is not on lockdown because of coronavirus yet, but we expect that it may come. But we announced, and today's the first real official day when everybody's working from home, right? And the young team, the first reaction was like, well, they were going to miss their colleagues, right? And they still wanted, how do we engage with our colleagues in person? So that was pleasant and a little bit sort of surprising to hear. But I think the times we're in, where everybody or many companies are now working from home because we have to, or we think it's a responsible thing to do. You think that this could be a kind of a tipping point in working from home and working remotely, whereby many companies that perhaps were maybe they had their bosses, or just the companies they thought, well, look, we don't believe in remote work. We might actually see that we can be more productive, and that actually there's going to be this shift to many companies going remote or hybrid remote, in the next few weeks or months.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point, and I would probably say two things about that. One is, I think a lot of people will be surprised in how productive they can be remote. Like, you'll just be surprised. You're like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, right? That didn't change as much as I thought it would. And so you'll come back and you'll be ready to adopt change, right? And so maybe it's a hybrid model like what we've done. Maybe it's a full remote. I think that will happen. The other thing I think will happen is that we will be more willing to experiment with things that we were not willing to, to experiment with. So, for instance, SaaStock's a great place to do events, right? Events are in trouble for the next 8 weeks in the U.S., right? So maybe, we've all sort of been resistant to remote events or virtual events. Nobody seems to like them. They don't seem to work. Maybe they do work, right? And we just have had a bad feeling on them. So if SaaStock does a virtual SaaStock and tries to innovate on a way to do virtual events, that may actually, people are finally willing to try it, right? I actually have a prejudice against virtual events.
Yeah.
For the next 8 weeks, what choice do I have?
Yeah.
So I'm going to attend a few virtual events. I may actually say, well, that wasn't so bad. That was actually quite interesting. And, I got 80% of the value, but I didn't have to get on a plane to travel 5 hours to San Francisco to do that. We may all learn very interesting things and break our habits and break our prejudice in the next, hopefully it's only 8 weeks. Hopefully, this we'll get back to some kind of normalcy shortly. But I think this is a really interesting time for all of us in the remote work and the virtual space.
Yeah. And again, 100% sort of in agreement with you. Obviously, where SaaStock is, has been to date, running, a conference business, for the SaaS community. our revenue, is all tied to the physical events that we do. We have been, thinking about, for a long time about, adding a virtual conference, because we think that, it does kind of make sense. But initially when, we launched the 2020 strategy for this year, coronavirus wasn't a thing, or like we weren't really kind of thinking about it. And we decided, let's focus on our physical events and what we have right now, not add any new products in right now, because we want to hit our goals with these, and let's kind of focus on that. Obviously, given the current situation, we will be launching a virtual conference, and I guess on the one hand, the opportunity has arisen to accelerate these kind of ideas that we've been thinking about, and to kind of fill these gaps. For everybody that can't attend a conference right now, to deliver something of high quality in a moment where people are stuck at home, but still care to connect with people. They want to maybe have some thought leadership, brand awareness, or want to kind of learn further about how can they grow and scale their businesses. So there is still that need, and there is this big void and vacuum sort of right now. So that is certainly accelerating our ideas, and we'll be launching something, or it will be taking place in June. So the first SaaStock
That's
virtual
exciting.
Conference. So we're excited for that. And I think you're right, that the mindset from people that I've been speaking to, over the last few years, there have been virtual conferences, but I think the technology on the one hand hasn't quite been there yet, but I think it's there now. Or I'm certain from what I've seen and from what we'll be launching. And again, that mindset shift, because of some of the experiences that people have had with virtual conferences to date. Maybe they think, well, it's not the same. It will never be the same as, meeting in person. But right. I think you touched on a lot of those points. And I think, again, this could be a tipping point for virtual conferences, if done right, and see that we can deliver the value. We can deliver it online. We won't have to travel. There won't be as many costs associated. But effectively, you're getting almost, all the value, apart from the only thing is these kind of serendipitous moments that sometimes you get at conferences, and some of the fun in the evening as well, right?
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. There's one thing actually I would have you think about, because we're thinking about it as well. So we do happy hours. So ChurnZero, we host happy hours about twice a month, and we do it in the city, right? So Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Toronto. We bring about 12 to 24 CS professionals, customer success professionals, into a happy hour. They're great. We just want to create an ecosystem. Well, those are being canceled, of course. So we're doing them virtually. So we're doing a New York one tonight, for instance, and it's all done virtually. But then, of course, like, why not do like that? That feels silly to do a New York one virtually. Why not do one that's very focused on the type of people who really want to be together? So let me give you an example. We know that when we talk to customer success people, that the folks who are in enterprise selling big ticket items want to talk to other people, who also sell big ticket items, so they can share best practices. So you may have, for instance, so we will have these happy hours that will then be virtual, that can be global, but bring together birds of a feather, like really focus. So for instance, you may have a SaaStock for SMBs, right? So the people who service SMB, and a SaaStock for people who enterprise, SaaStock for sales and marketing folks, a SaaStock for fintech. You can imagine, getting that much more verticalized if you can do these virtual meetings. I think there's still a lot to be solved and a lot of innovation here, but you can certainly think about this in a very different way now. Anyway, so I find it interesting, when these things happen, let's take advantage, it feels crass to say, but you often want to, innovation happens when there's crises, right? So, this is an opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, agree. On that note, I know we've come to the end of the show there, but a fascinating conversation, obviously, around customer success and working remotely, which is a super hot topic. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Where can people find you online? Find ChurnZero, find the R3 framework.
Yeah, so if you, so I'm on Twitter at Youmon, YOUMON, and you can also find us at ChurnZero. and then we're at ChurnZero.net is our website. And if you go to ChurnZero.net/R3, we'll have a guide. We'll tell you exactly how we did it, you know, sort of the algorithm of how people come in. So it'll be a very short guide, you know, take a look, right? Because it actually is a great, like, I think it'll work for almost any company, any knowledge company, you know, that this combination really works. So, and I'm happy to talk about it. So about the pluses and minuses for anyone who wants to talk a little bit more about R3.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Mon Tsang, founder and CEO of ChurnZero, thanks for being a guest on the SaaS Revolution Show.
I appreciate it, Alex. Thank you.